Hi there! You've clicked on this YouTube video because you want to make bread at home. I made bread at home for 20 years, and I'll tell you what, I've perfected some techniques to make it easy, because if bread is not easy, you're not going to make it at home. I have 3 kids, and I like to make fresh bread for them, and they actually prefer my bread to store-bought bread. It's easy to do, it's rewarding, and it's actually way cheaper than buying bread. And I'm going to show all of that to you in this video, okay? This is the type of loaf we're going to work on in this. This is a white bread I make. It's kind of an Italian family style. If I cut a piece here, it has a lot of texture. You can see it has a lot of texture to the bread. If you were to eat this piece of bread, you'd find it has a very chewy, flavorful texture to it that's much different than what you get in the store. And follow my instructions and you'll have a piece of this in your home tomorrow. I say tomorrow because it takes about a day. It's very easy to do, but it takes about a day. Let me show you some of the equipment you're going to have. A scale. I have an electronic scale here. A glass bowl of some type. Some type of covered pan. I just bought an inexpensive enamel cooker, an enamel roaster. And I have a couple of other things here. All my ingredient list is right here. Salt, yeast, flour. A little bit about ingredients. Flour. Okay. If you're looking to make bread at home, you're going to find that there's stuff on the internet about organic flour or whole wheat flour, or you could spend a lot of money and a lot of time trying to find the perfect flour. I'm going to show you how you can take one of the cheapest flours you can get at the supermarket. I happen to buy this Pillsbury bread flour. I'm using it for this purpose. I've used better flours, but what I want to show is with this flour here, I can make wonderful loaf of bread. And with better flours, I can also make wonderful loaves of bread. I can buy this in Maryland. It's usually $3.50. It often goes on sale for $2.99. When I see it for $2.99, I tend to buy about 3 bags. That'll last me about a month. The key to bread flour is, if you could zoom in a little, I don't know if it'll come out, but you see the protein says 4 grams. The all-purpose flour in your house tends to have about 2 to 3 grams. That 4 grams represents a little bit of extra gluten inside the flour, and that's what makes bread have the texture it has. Okay, I tend to store my flour in a container. And one other part about ingredients, yeast. That is bread yeast, or just commercial bread yeast I buy at Costco. You can buy the small packets of individual yeast at the supermarket. They tend to come 3 envelopes kind of stamped together, and they cost about $1.50. So it's about 50 cents of yeast for each loaf of bread. You don't have to spend that. For about $6, I buy 2 pounds of yeast at Costco. It comes in a vacuum packed bag. That bag will last me about 2 years. I tend to throw it all inside a plastic container, and I keep this in my refrigerator. If you keep it in the refrigerator, yeast will stay ready to go for a long time. Yeast is a living organism. So if we keep it in the fridge, it's going to stay dormant until we want it. This yeast I probably bought 1.5 years ago. That's how much I have left. Initially it was filled about this high, so I used about that much in 1.5 years. Okay, let's get over to our digital scale. My simple loaf of bread here uses, I'll turn my scale on, and I'm going to do everything in grams. We're going to go metric here. I'm going to get about 500 grams of flour. Take my flour and I put it inside my bowl. I'm also going to show you that the way I make bread is virtually no mess. Because you're going to say, making bread's hard. I can't make a mess in my kitchen. I don't have time to clean up. everything I show you is going to fit into a working parent's schedule. I have a job, 3 kids, and all my kids have activities, and I still can make bread every other day. I've taken just over 500 grams of flour here. Now I'm going to add salt. For every 100 grams of flour, I use 2 grams of salt. That's pretty close to what they use in commercial bread. So I'm going to reset my scale, and I'm going to pour my salt until I get 10 grams. Now you can adjust a little bit lower for those that try and limit their sodium, but this is fairly on the low side of bread. You go much lower than 2 grams per 100 grams of flour, then you're going to have less of a taste to your bread. Okay, so I put that right in there. Now I'm going to take a spoon. I'm going to stir everything up. Mix it all together. There's a reason I mix it together. You're going to see why. I want my ratio of salt and flour to be roughly uniformly distributed, because the way I make bread, sometimes all the flour does not get used. I might leave 50, 60 grams behind. And that's why I tend to go just over 500 grams in my recipe when I pour out the flour. Now I'm going to take some of this flour, maybe 2 heaping tablespoons. I'm going to put it in a bowl. Now I'm going to take about 4 heaping tablespoons and put it in another bowl. Okay. So I have a bowl of flour here, and I have a much smaller bowl of flour here. Now I'm going to take water. This is warm water. It's probably 130 degrees. It's the hottest tap water I can get for my sink. I'm going to pour it right into this flour, and I'm going to get it to the consistency of paste or like glue. A little too wet here. Okay. Okay, I got that stirred up. I take my yeast, and I add my yeast in here. All right. Now you might be saying, why are you doing this? Well, I'll tell you why. A lot of recipes call for adding sugar to your bread recipe. And the purpose of that sugar is to give the yeast some energy. Okay? Yeast will eat wheat flour straight up. But wheat flour is a starch. There's very little sugar in it. It's almost all starch. It's difficult for the yeast to digest the starch. They have to break it down. They have to produce enzymes that cause the starches to break apart. If you add sugar to the recipe, even if it's just a small amount, like a tablespoon of sugar in this whole batch of bread, the yeast will eat those sugar molecules first. And when they eat that, they produce carbon dioxide and alcohol. The carbon dioxide is what causes our bread to rise. When they can't get the sugar, when they're deprived of that easy sugar to get, and they have to get the yeast, they have to break down the starches, it actually produces more flavor in the bread, but it makes the bread rise slower. So this recipe I'm going to show you, you start at nighttime, and then you leave it overnight, and we're going to tend to it maybe once or twice whenever we can, and we're going to watch it grow. Another word I want to show, we're in Central Maryland. Outside, we've had a very cold week. So it hasn't been above freezing for about 5 days. Bread likes warm weather to rise. My house is not terribly warm right now, so it's also going to cause this bread to rise even slower. But that's going to be a good thing. It's going to develop a loaf with a lot of texture and a lot of flavor. And if you follow my recipe, you'll enjoy this stuff at home. I'm going to leave this yeast and flour mixture right here for about 10-20 minutes. And you'll actually see it start to foam up. That gets my yeast to run and start because I'm going to add that yeast to this ingredients right here. So we'll be back in about 20 minutes. Hi, so we're back after 20 minutes. Okay. It's very cool in this room. So this yeast has been rising a little bit. You can start to see it's getting a foamy texture. That's good enough. It just tells me the yeast is alive. And what happened there was the few billion yeast I put in there probably turned into a few trillion at this point. It's a living organism. So I'm going to take this right now. I'm going to put it right inside my flour. Okay. I'm going to take this all and I'm going to stir it. Just a little bit. And the reason I stir this is because I want to make sure these yeasts spread all around, okay? Now, I have, actually pause for a minute. Okay, what I have here again is the warmest tap water I can get. The reason I have warm tap water is I want to get everything going. If this is at 65 degrees, it's going to grow very slow, but if I put warm water in here, it'll be warm for a little while. And I'm going to dump, this is 2 cups. I'm not going to dump all of it in here. And I can't give you an exact amount of water. Sometimes people say, what's the exact amount of water? Well, it depends on how humid your local environment is. Your yeast, your flour, actually will grab water out of the air, so it will be more wet sometimes of the year, and it'll be more wet depending on what part of the country and what kind of climate you have locally. So you see I put this all in here. This came out just a tad wetter than I typically like to make it, but it's actually working pretty well. Again, you're not doing much work here. You want to make sure this is thoroughly mixed up. It'll be a little bit lumpy. You want to make sure it's very well mixed up, and as I stir it, you can actually start to feel it grabbing the spoon, trying to slow it down. What I'm doing here is the simple act of folding the dough and stretching the dough actually causes the proteins to start to form long bonds, and that's what gives bread texture. Okay, so you see, this wasn't a whole lot of work. I have a spoon here, it's covered in dough. I tend to sprinkle a little bit of flour on here, and then I scrape everything off. Okay. And there we have it. I'm going to let this sit for a couple of hours. Actually, hold on one second. All right. I let this sit. I put a lid on top of it, just a plate. And as you can see, I have made almost no mess. The flour we set aside is going to be folded into this flour. And it's going to be folded into it over several stages. So right now we're just going to let it sit and rise just a little bit.